Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to National Pingtung University of Science and Technology. First, let me briefly introduce myself. I have a PhD in food engineering and about 25 years of experience in the testing, inspection, and certification industry. Currently, I work in three positions. I am an adjunct professor at Kangwon University in Seoul, an official advisor to the Korean Ministry of Food and Drug Safety, and the East Asia Regional Director of QCert, a Europe-based certification body. On the left, you can see a photo of my students at Kangwon University, where I teach Korean food regulation in the Department of Food Science and Biotechnology of Animal Resources. The center and right photos are related to my work as an official advisor to MFDS. The center photo is from a global HESA project where I have been involved in developing and promoting Korea's global HESA system. The photo on the right is from the 2024 HESAP Korea, a national HESAP conference organized by MFDS, where I was invited as a speaker on food equipment safety and regulation. You can also see the QCert logo in the center of the slide. As the East Asia Regional Director of QCert, I'm responsible for developing certification activities in this region. So today, I will speak from the perspective of university professor, a government advisor, and a regional director in international certification. Before we go into numbers and regulations, let's start with something a bit more delicious. When you hear Korea, what kind of food comes to your mind? Maybe instant ramen, kimbap, tteokbokki, kimchi, or bibimbap like this in the picture. In Korea, we often call all of this simply K-food. Many of these products are already very popular here in Taiwan as well. Today's talk is basically about what is happening behind this food. How big is the Korean food industry that produces them? And what kind of food safety system supports K-food when it is exported to other countries? To answer those questions, I will talk about two main topics. In part one, I will first give you a brief overview of the Korean food industry, and then in part two, we will look at Korea's current HACCP system and new global HACCP system, which are the main tools Korea is using to keep this food safe in the global market. Here, I would like to briefly explain what we mean by food and the food industry in Korea. In Korean law, food mainly means agricultural, livestock, and fishery products that people can eat or drink either directly or after processing. The Food Sanitation Act includes all food and beverages except medicines. Based on this, the food industry covers all economic activities that produce and process these agriculture, livestock, and fishery products with the goal of delivering safe, value-added food to customers. I start with this definition because in the next slide, the Korean food industry will include this entire supply chain from raw materials to processed food and beverages in the market. This diagram shows the value chain of the Korea food industry from upstream to the final consumer. Starting from the upstream side, we have fertilizers, animal feed, seeds, and agriculture machinery. These industries support the production of agriculture, livestock, and fishery products. Next is primary production, farms and fisheries that produce grains, meat, dairy products, and seafood. These raw materials then move to wholesale and distribution. After that, we go into processing and manufacturing, where companies turn raw materials into processed meat, dairy products, bakery items, beverages, sauce, and many other types of food and drink. The next stage is downstream distribution and food service. This includes logistics, supermarkets, food ingredient distributors, restaurant, catering companies, and school cafeterias. Finally, all of these activities connect to the end consumer who buys food in retail stores or eats in food service. I show this value chain because in later slides, when we talk about HACCP and global HACCP, we are mainly focusing on the processing and downstream parts. But you can see that food safety actually needs to be considered along the entire chain from farm to table. Now, let's look at some numbers on the size and growth of the Korean food industry. First, in 2017, total production was about 79.5 billion US dollars, which is roughly 6% of all manufacturing production. The industry also provided jobs for about 217,000 people, around 7% of manufacturing employment. What is important here is the growth rate. Between 2007 and 2017, the food industry grew by about 6.4% per year, which is faster than the overall manufacturing sector. This is a typical Korean food factory. Automated lines, stainless steel equipment, and workers following strict hygiene rules. In many facilities, systems like a heads-up are already a basic requirement for operation. In the following slide, I'll briefly explain how the industry is structured, not only factories like this, but also restaurants, cafes, and logistics. Some more recent statistics for the Korean food industry based on a survey by Mafra. In 2024, there were about 504,000 businesses in the food sector. Around 460,000 of them were in food and beverage service, and about 44,000 were food and beverage manufacturers. In terms of employment, about 1.3 million people work in the food industry. And in 2023, total sales reached about 153 trillion Korean won, a 7.2% increase compared with 2022. So if we combine this with the previous slide, we can say that the Korean food industry is large, labor intensive, and still growing steadily. This slide shows the basic structure of the Korean food industry. First, if we look at the number of businesses, about 91% are in food and beverage service, restaurant, cafe, convenience store, small dinners, and catering. So in terms of the number of firms, the industry is dominated by many small service outlets, not by factories. Second, the manufacturing side, food and beverage factories, is much smaller in number, but it generates a large share of total sales and added value. These companies invest in processing technology, packaging, branding, and R&D, So one factory usually produces far more volume and value than one restaurant. Third, overall, the Korean food industry is labor intensive and SME centered. It is much easier to start a restaurant or a small food business than a heavy industry plant facility. So we see many small and medium-sized enterprises with relatively few employees at each site. So this is the basic picture inside Korea. Now, let's see how this industry connects to the global markets. On this slide, we can see how K-food has moved from a mainly domestic market to a global market. According to this data, in 2018, the export value of processed food was about 5.65 billion US dollars. That is more than double the level in 2009. So in less than 10 years, exports have more than doubled. The strongest growth has been in categories like noodle, cookies, and confectionery and beverages. Many of you probably know instant ramen, Korean snacks, and K-drinks from Hallyu culture. These products are now sold widely, not only in Korea, but also across Asia, the US, and Europe. This export trend is very important for our discussion today. Once a product becomes global K-food, it has to meet different countries' food safety requirements at the same time. That is one of the reasons why Korea is now working on a new global HACCP program, which I will explain later in part 2. This slide shows where Korean processed food are exported to. The main markets are China, ASEAN, the US, Japan, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and the EU. The recent years, China and ASEAN have been the strongest growth engine, while the US and Japan remain very important stable markets. You can also see Taiwan in the table with the export of around 180 to 200 million US dollars. This means that Taiwan is already a significant K-food market in East Asia. So K-food is clearly expanding from the domestic market to the global market, and exports are growing in many regions. But before we go deeper into regulations, I'd like to come back for a moment to what K-food looks like in everyday life in Korea. This is a very typical convenience store lunchbox in Korea. You can find something like this in almost every convenience store, such as 7-Eleven, CU, or GS25. For many one-person household and busy workers, meals like this are part of their daily diet, not just an occasional snack. In other words, K-food is not only an export product, but also something people depend on every day inside Korea. So when we think about food safety and health, we are not only protecting consumers in overseas markets, but also Korean consumers who eat these products every day. To understand this better, let's look at the market trend behind this kind of products. The lunchbox we just saw is closely related to two major market trends in Korea: the rapid increase in one-person households and the strong growth of the home meal replacement and meal kits. On this slide, I will explain this trend in a more systematic way. In the last decade, there has been a rapid increase in one-person household in Korea. Many people live alone, work long hours, and do not have much time to cook. As a result, The market for home meal replacements and meal kits has grown very quickly. Consumers are looking for products that are ready to eat or ready to heat, and they want to meal that are easy to prepare but still tasty and safe. There is especially strong demand for ready-to-eat and ready-to-heat products and convenience store meals and simple cooking sauce. These trends create new opportunities for food companies, for example, in frozen food, various sauce, and functional foods such as probiotics. For food safety, this trend is also important because more and more people are relying on processed and ready-to-eat food in their daily life. That means HACCP and global HACCP need to work well in these categories to protect consumers' health. Before we move on, let me show you a more fun side of K-food. This scene from K-pop Demon Hunters shows the characters eating convenience store gimbap, ramen, and snack. These are not just fantasy food, they are real products you can buy in Korean convenience stores. In Korea, K-food doesn't stay only on the shelf, it appears inside the contents itself. When characters in a movie or drama enjoy a certain ramen, fried chicken, or convenience store meals, many viewers want to try the same thing the next day. In other words, eating scenes in K-movies and K-dramas, the mukbang culture, can directly drive sales of real products. Sometimes the collaboration also comes onto the packaging with the characters from animations or games printed on the product. But the key point is that K-food and K-content promote each other. People discover the food through the story and then they meet the same product in real life. So K-food is not only about taste or nutrition. It is also about story, image, and culture. And it grows together with K-pop, K-dramas, and K-movies as part of the K-wave. The next slide, I will briefly summarize how K-food fits into the broader K-wave together with K-pop, K-dramas, and K-beauty. So now K-food is clearly part of the K-wave, together with K-pop, K-dramas, K-beauty, and other K-contents. When people enjoy Korean culture, many of them also become interested in Korean food products. As a result, exports of instant noodles, snacks, seaweed, sauce, fried chicken, and tteokbokki are growing in Asia and are expanding into the US and Europe. But as K-food goes global, food safety certification and regulatory compliance become essential. To sell in markets like Taiwan, the US, the EU, or ASEAN, companies must meet each market's food safety rules at the same time. And this is where part 2 begins. How Korea's HACCP system and the new global HACCP program are being developed to support K-food as a trusted global brand. Now we move on to part 2 of today's session. In part 1, we looked at the Korean food industry and K-food as a global brand, how the industry is structured, how exports are growing, and how K-food is expanding to market. In part 2, I would like to focus on food safety management for this global expansion. The title of this part is Food Safety Management Action Plan for the Global Expansion of K-food. In this section, I will first explain how the Korean HACCP system has developed and then introduce the new global HACCP voluntary program led by the MFDS. Please think of this as a case study. How one country, in this case Korea, is trying to upgrade its national HACCP system so that Korean companies can meet international standards and export K-food more safely and more easily. I hope this part will be useful for you, especially if you are interested in exporting to Korea, working with Korea partners, or designing your own food safety strategies for global markets. On this slide, I will briefly explain who is in charge of food safety in Korea. The main authority is the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety, called MFDS. It is the central government agency for food, drugs, medical devices, and cosmetics. But today we focus only on the food part. In food safety, MFDS mainly does three things. First, it enforces the Food Sanitation Act, the basic food safety law in Korea. Second, it sets standards and specifications for food, additives, packaging, containers, and equipment. Third, it provides guidelines for HACCP and food labeling, so companies know how to apply HACCP and what to write on the label. MFDS does work together with the Ministry of Agriculture, local governments, industry, and consumer groups. So when we look at the Korea's HACCP system and the new global HACCP program in the next slide, you can think of MFDS as a main leader working with other partners to manage food safety from farm to table. So what is the key legal standard for HACCP in Korea? It is the Food and Livestock Products Safety Management Certification Standards, issued as MFDS Notice 2020-15. The English version is available. This notice explains which businesses and products can be certified, what they must do in their prerequisite programs and HACCP plans, and how certification and renewal work. It applies to both food and livestock products, and it is basically the legal backbone of Korea's HACCP system. Next, let's briefly look at how the HACCP system in Korea has evolved over time. On this slide, you can see the main phases from 1995 to 2025. First, in the late 1990s, Korea created the legal basis for HACCP and introduced the basic standard for food and livestock products. Second, in the early 2000s, the scope of mandatory HACCP slowly expanded, especially for high-risk food such as meat, dairy, and ready-to-eat products. Third, from around 2010, Korea began to include small businesses and introduce more risk-based audits, including extended and unannounced evaluations. HACCP was no longer only for big factories. Finally, since 2020, the focus has been on smart HACCP using digital tools, real-time monitoring, and data analysis to make the system more efficient and more preventive. So overall, Korea has moved from basic introduction to mandatory HACCP for high-risk products, then to supporting small businesses, and now toward a smart, risk-based, and more global HACCP system. This background helps to explain why Korea is now developing the new global HACCP program, which I will talk about in the next slide. So now let's see how many companies in Korea are HACCP certified. As of 2024, there are about 21,000 HACCP certified companies in total. roughly 11,000 in food, and 10,000 in livestock. The graph shows the trend from 2015 to 2024. In 2015, there were around 6,835 companies, so the number has more than tripled in about 10 years. Both, both food and livestock HEXUP certifications have increased steadily every year. This tells us two things. First, HEXUP has become normal practice for many Korean food and livestock businesses. Second, we now have a large group of companies already familiar with HEXUP. We've just seen how widely HEXUP is used in Korea. Now, I'd like to summarize how Korea's food safety system is evolving. We can think of it in three stages. First, on the left, as basic hygiene control. This is traditional, rule-based hygiene, cleaning, sanitizing, and personal hygiene, mainly focus basic regulation. Here, action is often reactive. We respond after a problem happens. Second, in the middle, is systematic food safety management with HACCP. Companies establish standard procedure and HACCP plans. The approach becomes risk-based and preventive. We find critical control points and control them before problems occur. Third, on the right, is advanced food safety with IoT or smart HACCP. This means real-time CCP monitoring, automatic data recording, and more reliable data so companies can respond faster and even do predictive management. At the bottom, you can see that as of 2024, HACCP certified processed food account for about 91.2% of total production in Korea. So Korea has moved from basic hygiene to systematic HACCP and now towards smart data-driven HACCP. This is the foundation for the new global HACCP program, which I will introduce on the next slide. Now, let's move to the next step of Korea's food safety system, which is called Global HACCP or GHACCP. So far, we've seen how Korea built its national HACCP system, expanded it to many businesses, and moved towards smart HACCP with the digital tools. But as K-food goes global, Korean companies also need to match international standards such as Codex, FSMA, and GFSI, and work smoothly with overseas partners. To respond to this, the MFDS has created a new voluntary program called Global HACCP. In the next few slides, I will explain what GHACCP is, how it connects to Korea's existing HACCP, and why it can be useful for companies that export to Korea or cooperate with Korean partners. On this slide, I would like to explain the background for introducing global HACCP standards. Korean companies asked MFDS to make Korean HACCP more aligned with global expectations. There are three types of risks and needs behind this request. First, on the left, we have intentional contamination risks caused by internal or external actors. For example, food terrorism or sabotage. To address these issues, we need a concept called food defense. Second, in the middle, there is economically motivated adulteration or substitution of food and raw materials, especially under supply chain pressure. This includes cases where cheaper ingredients are mixed in or substituted to gain profit. Here the key concept is food fraud prevention. Third, on the right, we need to strengthen management responsibility, transparency, and internal communication in order to prevent incident. This is not only about technical controls, but also about the mindset and behavior of people in the company. This leads to the idea of food safety culture. So global HACCP is not just more of the same HACCP. It is an effort to integrate food defense, food fraud prevention, and food safety culture into the existing HACCP system so that Korean companies can meet international expectations and build a stronger trust in global markets. This slide shows one of the main references for global HACCP, the Codex General Principles of Food Hygiene. The revised Codex text highlights 4 key ideas, and these are also reflected in Korea's global HACCP. First, Codex puts strong emphasis on top management responsibility. Food safety should be led by management with clear objectives and resources, not left only to the QA department. Second, it stresses food safety culture across the whole organization, everyday behavior, communication, and attitude that support food safety. Third, it widens the hazard scope, including allergens and other emerging risks, not just microbiological hazard. Fourth, it encourages the use of new technologies, digital tools, and automated systems for monitoring, traceability, and documentation, which is the same direction as smart HACCP we saw earlier. In short, Codex provides the global benchmark, and Korea's global HACCP is designed so that companies following G-HACCP are aligned with these Codex expectations. The other references for global HACCP are overseas food safety system. First, in the US and Australia, the law requires companies to manage intentional contamination, for example, food terrorism, or deliberate contamination. So food companies must have formal food defense measures. Second, GFSI recognized schemes such as FSSC 22000, BRCGS, SQF, and IFS are widely used by exporters to Europe, North America, Oceania, and Asia. Under the GFSI framework, food safety systems are expected to cover hygiene and sanitary process controls, food defense, food fraud prevention, and food safety culture, allergen management, and overall food safety management systems. So many overseas markets already expect a comprehensive system-based approach beyond traditional HACCP. Korea's global HACCP is being designed so that Korea companies and their overseas partners can more easily align with these international practices when they trade with each other. So to summarize, global HACCP is based on 3 main pillars: Codex, the US and Australia regulation, and GFSI. From Codex, global HACCP takes the latest HACCP guideline and the general principles of food hygiene as its basic international reference. From the US and Australia, it reflects the FSMA style approach, preventive control, intentional adulteration, and strong regulatory enforcement. From GFSI, It refers to schemes like FSSC 22000, BRCGS, SQF, and IFS, which include detailed requirements for hygiene programs, food defense, food flood prevention, allergen management, and food safety culture. So when we say global HACCP, we do not mean a completely new system. It is a harmonized framework that brings these three international sources together and turn them into one practical program for Korean companies and their global partners. Now let's see what has actually changed from Korean HACCP to global HACCP. On the left, the current legal HACCP in Korea has 80 items in total, covering prerequisite programs and HACCP plan items like hazard analysis and CCP control. Global HACCP keeps these 80 items, but add 72 more related to food defense, food flood prevention, allergen management, quality and labeling control, emergency response, and food safety culture. So you can think of the global HACCP as Korean legal HACCP plus additional international requirements. It shows that a company is going beyond basic legal compliance and aiming to meet global level expectations. Finally, this slide shows the global HACCP symbol. The idea of this logo is simple: to show that Korea's HACCP has been upgraded to an international level and to make it easy to recognize in global markets. When companies use this logo, it means they have Korean legal HACCP and they also meet the additional global HACCP requirements. Our hope is that this symbol will help K-food be seen as a safe and trusted choice for consumers and buyers around the world. We started today with the Korean food industry and the rise of K-food, and then we looked at how Korea is trying to support that growth with a stronger, more internationally aligned systems from national HACCP to the new global HACCP program. My main message is simple: good taste is no longer enough. If we want K-food and Asian food in general to be trusted and enjoyed all over the world, we need science-based food safety and clear, transparent standard. For the student here, I hope this talk gave you some ideas for your future study, research, and career in food science and food safety. For the professors and industry experts, I hope this can be a small starting point for more collaborating between Korea and Taiwan in the future. To close, I'd like to show a short 40-second video about Korea's Global HACCP program. The title is Adding Global Standards to 30 Years of HACCP Experience in Korea, produced by the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety. I hope you enjoy it, and maybe you can try to find me in the video. Thank you very much.